Hello, this is the Women's Eye Podcast, and this is Laurie McAndish King, your host. Here on the Women's Eye, you'll meet women who are committed to speaking out about things that are important to them and to taking action. This episode is brought to you by the Casco Financial Group in Phoenix, Arizona. Casco's president, Catherine Scrivano, started her business to help people like you create the financial strength to achieve their dreams. And I've heard Catherine speak. She's fabulous. She really has a way of clarifying and simplifying what can be an incredibly complex financial planning tangle. She's wonderful. That's Catherine. Today, though, I'm super excited to be talking with my guest, Sarah Gristwood. She's an author with a lifelong commitment to publicizing women's experiences in history, which I think is so interesting. Sarah has written about everything from 15th and 16th century history, including a book which I think sounds fascinating called Game of Queens, The Women Who Made 16th Century Europe. Wow. And she's also written about 20th century figures from Winston Churchill to Elizabeth II. And today we get to talk to Sarah about her career as an author and about her latest book, Secret Voices, A Year of Women's Diaries. I'll give you just a preview of this book. It's a collection of more than 100 women's diary entries, multiple diary entries from more than 100 women over the course of 400 years. I want to talk to you about how you researched that. And in it, we discover some of the most private, sometimes they're meant private, sometimes public thoughts of women like civil rights activist Ida B. Wells, explorer Freya Stark, historical figures like Florence Nightingale, Marie Curie, prison reformer Elizabeth Fry, writers, tons of writers, I love that, Emily Bronte, Joyce Carol Oates, Sylvia Plath, Anais Nin, Alice Walker, Simone de Beauvoir, George Eliot, some of my favorites, and more than 100 people all together. From Helen Keller to Anne Morrow Lindbergh to even Oprah Winfrey and Emma Thompson. So huge range. Welcome, Sarah. You're joining us today from where are you?
In the UK, in England, Kent, right down by the Channel, outside Deal.
Deal. So that's on the
It's on the south coast, near Dover.
Near Dover. Okay, near the White Cliffs. So
one of the Sank ports. We've got one of the Henry VIII forts. So on a clear day, you can see France across the water.
Oh, that's right. I looked it up. I saw that Henry VIII fort. That is so cool. I had never been aware of that before. And it's the one that has like, it's rose shaped or almost flower shaped.
Yeah, it is. That's right. I know.
That's so cool. Okay, so I have to start at what seems like the beginning. I kept a diary when I was a kid, when I was a young girl. I think almost all my friends did. Did you keep a diary?
Only intermittently.
Yeah.
I never was a total Dear Diary. I know it's strange, isn't it, for someone who's had a lifelong professional interest in them. But maybe that's why. Maybe that made me wary. Who knows?
Well, how did you get the idea then for this book?
Well, I first worked on women's diaries, decades ago, a million years ago in my 20s. But then they were very much an untapped field. I'm happy to say a lot of work's been done since then. But even so, the women's eye in diaries doesn't get quite the look in that I feel it should do. Still, most of the anthologies out there don't have anything like 50 percentages. And that despite the fact that the diary was regarded as being particularly a woman's form because it was private, domestic, intimate. The ladies of the past weren't having to push themselves out there and try and get published in a deeply unladylike fashion. Not that some of them didn't want that. I'm happy to say that a lot of these diarists didn't accept the ladylike norms of their day.
Yeah, they certainly didn't. Wow. Well, so first of all, how did you do all this research?
Well, again, because I've been working on this earlier in my life as well, thank heavens I didn't come to it completely cold. If so, I think I would have got absolutely drowned out. As it is, I'm already thinking, if only I could do volume 2, because I'm finding all the time more diarists, more entries from the same diarists, things that I feel I missed the first time round. The material is just so rich.
And so after reading after all that research and then collecting all these entries over 400 years, what's the takeaway? What do you see that was similar or what was different maybe from century to century?
Well, quite a few takeaways, I think. But to me, perhaps 2 are the biggest. And one of them is that even through 400 years, you find so many familiarities. I think that was the biggest thing for me, to find women from several hundred years ago having exactly the same concerns and fighting the same battles that we do today. And some of those we think of as modern battles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you mentioned Elizabeth Fry. More than 2 centuries ago, you've got Elizabeth Fry, Quaker, English, great prison reformer. Also wife and mother of, I think it was 11 children.
Wow.
And what a surprise, she worried that the husband and children were distracting her from what she felt was her vocation, her career, basically. And the husband and children got jealous when she gave too much time to the prison reform. Well, juggling work and family, anybody? That one hasn't exactly gone away, has it? And I think that's the other takeaway in a sense, though a less positive one, almost a sense of frustration that comes out of women of the past. And of course, these are often very intelligent, quietly ambitious, determined women.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they did, unsurprisingly, kick against the expectations of their day. They didn't always do so openly. Sometimes it was veiled under, wry humor or, oh, good heavens, silly me. But you can see it there all the same.
I did notice a few of those, oh, good heavens, silly me's. And I thought, oh, how odd that women, I don't know, it struck me as odd, but
what the women, even in their diaries, would be doing, oh, silly me. Well, I think on the one hand, well, maybe some of them were, there was a humorous sense, but also perhaps they had internalized the criticisms of their society.
Yeah, I'm sure they would have.
When they put them on board. Yeah. But by and large, I do think that often the diary was the one place where a lot of these women could voice these feelings that weren't accepted or acceptable in their own day.
So history repeats itself.
Exactly. Yes.
It does.
And that's why I think we need to hear the voices of our foremothers, basically.
Well, you wrote in the foreword, and I'd like you to talk a little bit more about this, about the importance of foregrounding women's private experiences throughout history. What does that mean and why is that important?
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, in some of my other books, I've written about all the women of the 16th century, powerful women, the women behind the Wars of the Roses. But go back to past a couple of centuries, and you start to find women's voices, most women's, hard to find because They didn't pass laws. They didn't appear in law courts. They didn't fight on battlegrounds. They didn't even publish books in their own name. And because of that, they've slightly vanished from the records until comparatively recently. Obviously, there's the great exceptions like, Elizabeth I or someone, but the vast majority. And I think we need to, if we're to get a more equitable view of history, we need to reclaim their experience, which wasn't always on the battleground law court or whatever. Not that they weren't interested in the big issues. A number of them were writing about their battles for, the abolitionist cause or other important, vital matters. But sometimes they were writing about, their children and what they were cooking. Or they were writing about both in the same entry, which I found particularly. There's one I just love from Virginia Woolf in 1918 about how nothing much had happened that day, but she'd write down 3 things. Hers and her husband's first visit to the 17 Club, talk of peace, and the breaking of her tortoiseshell spectacles. So talk of peace, which is after all the most important, but it's fairly obvious that the tortoiseshell spectacles were weighing pretty heavily.
Right up there.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, so with this huge range of topics, Sarah, and as you pointed out, many of them in the same entries, how did you pull this all together? How did you think about the structure of?
Well, because luckily for me, probably, it has a very clear structure in that it does go through the days of the year, January 1st, January 2nd. So in a way that took a bit of the strain off me. I could, for each day, make a list of all the, I thought, particularly interesting extra quotable for that day, and then start to cull it down, cursing the fact, or hunting for more, cursing the fact that it seemed as if everyone wrote on, I don't know, June the 12th and no one on June.
A big day.
Yeah, but I did want to try and get what I felt was a range of women's experience. So obviously, the diaries that are most out there are often those of either very well-known individuals like Virginia Woolf, Queen Victoria, or that record extraordinary, often tragic experience, whether it's a traveler's diary or a diary from a victim of the Holocaust. And I wanted to include those, of course I did, but I did also want to get a feeling of what most women were thinking about most days.
And after having gone through this whole editorial process, did it change you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. It certainly changed my awareness of some things. I think I did actually feel this strong sense of community and really, I guess, support from these women in the past who'd been going through what I was going through at the same time. And I think it is a bit like finding an army at your back, one I hadn't really been aware of before.
I love that, Sarah. I hadn't thought about it that way until just now when you said that. And now thinking back, I didn't read the whole year's worth of diary entries, but I read a lot of them. And I can feel that, what you just said, that it does feel supportive.
Yes, it does. It totally does. Because I think those of us who grew up in the latter part of the 20th century, it felt a bit as though we were frontline troops.
It did.
Quite a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But guess what? There were others who pushed the battle lines on a lot. And we knew in theory that we owed them, that they were there. But actually reading about their day-to-day concerns just absolutely brings it alive.
So that's really why,
Mm,
that's why it's important to understand what other women have gone through. But I
yes.
want to ask this, I want to flip this now.
Uh-huh.
What about social media? How do you think about social media when you think
Good.
about?
Yeah, good question. No, I totally agree with you that we do need to think about it, because I don't write a regular diary. I do at points of stress or reflection write, thoughts, journaling a little to some degree. But my day-to-day record of what I've been doing, seeing, even to some degree feeling, is the photos on my mobile phone. And I think we do need to think about and to some embrace social media as another aspect of diary writing. On the face of it, they might seem totally opposed, because diary, secret voices about looking inwards, writing for yourself things you couldn't tell anybody else. But, and of course, social media, well, the clue's in the name. But I think social media doesn't entirely work that way for a lot of people. I think for a lot of us, as with the diarists who knew their work might be published, nonetheless, the fact of writing it down without anybody else's face in front of you, with a cloak of anonymity, if you want it, does give a kind of freedom. And certainly, whether it's for controversial opinions, or whether it's just for the fact that you woke up really grumpy but then saw a cute dog on the way into work, well, it might have been your diary once, but what will you do now? Very possibly you'll I still say tweet, X or TikTok or Instagram, whatever, you'll post about it.
And
So
also, I want to know what you think both about social media and about more traditional diary writing or journalism. What about our journaling, rather? What about the therapeutic value? Did you see women writing at all? Was there an awareness of that?
Yes, there totally was. I mean, whether it is Virginia Woolf, she writes as, I want to put this, this, and this, and now, of course, I've written it half away, as she wanted to do. Her frustrations when she'd been to her sister's house and seen her life with her children and so on. Or Elizabeth Smart, the American writer, said, yes, this diary does sound vain, but that's what it's for, to write out and thus away all the little niggles. So yes, I think journaling, and this will be journaling, whether it's spoken into a machine or written on paper, but it's not social media. There will continue to be. We're very aware now of the therapeutic importance, value of journaling, but women were in the past as well. They absolutely knew it.
So we didn't need all that science to tell us. I love science, but we didn't. But that part was self-evident. I have a ton more questions for you, and I'm sure our listeners might too, but we're towards the end of our time. I just want to remind listeners that they can get Secret Voices. It came out in February, right?
At the very end, yes.
Oh, okay. So it's out. They can get it at bookstores, their favorite bookstores. They can get it online.
Yes.
And they can connect with you on Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever. And all those links will be on the Women's Eye website. So listeners, you can connect more with Sarah there. Also on our website are links to 2 Women's Eye books. There's 20 women change makers, and also 20 women storytellers. I have read both these books several times and I love them. They are so inspiring every time I read them. And I think they remind me of, in a way, of your book, Sarah, that you can just dip in and
Okay.
they're just beautifully inspiring. You can dip into all of these. So, and also, listeners, remember to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the Women's Eye newsletter and YouTube channel. And thank you again, Sarah, for being here with us. And thank
Thank
you.
you for having me.
Yeah, thanks, listeners, for joining us. Yeah, so lovely to talk to you. I'm Laurie McAndish King, and remember, it's the world as we see it.